For 40 years, my neighbor Gus lived quietly next door. My son and his wife hated him with a passion I never understood. They built a 10-foot fence to block him out. They sued him. "He's a threat to this family," they told me over and over. But when he died last week, I was the only person at his funeral. The rain soaked through my coat while my son celebrated back at the house with champagne. I thought that was the end of it. Then a lawyer handed me a thick envelope and said, "Mr. Bennett, you have no idea who your neighbor really was." I opened it, and my knees nearly gave out. My children called him a monster. The real monsters had been sleeping under my roof the whole time. My name is Harrison Bennett. I'm 70. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I know how to spot a weak foundation when a structure is about to collapse. I just never saw the cracks in my own family until it was too late. It started 6 months ago. I came home from physical therapy to find a construction crew sinking posts into my backyard. A solid black wood fence, 10 feet high, slicing through the garden I'd tended for decades. My daughter-in-law Tiffany, 29 and a self-styled lifestyle influencer, was live-streaming to her phone, squeezing out a fake tear. "We're living next to a predator," she told her followers. My son Preston stood beside her holding a clipboard. I grabbed it from the foreman, $5,000, paid from my pension account, money I'd given Preston for roof repairs. "This is my house," I said. Tiffany laughed. "Actually, Dad, it isn't, or did you forget?" She was right. After my wife Sarah died 2 years ago, grieving and vulnerable, I'd signed the main house over to Preston and moved into the guest cottage, thinking I was securing their future. I didn't know I was signing away my dignity. The predator next door was Augustus Wainwright, Gus. 75, quiet, retired, in a wheelchair with cataracts so bad he'd stopped driving years ago. Tiffany claimed she'd seen him watching her through the hedges with binoculars. When I looked through the fence gap, I saw an old man watering roses with shaking hands, squinting at the dirt. Preston told me I was naive, that Gus was sharp and obsessed. When I pushed back, Preston gripped my shoulder like I was a confused old man and mentioned adjusting my medication. It was a threat disguised as concern. I snuck through the woods that separated our properties and knocked on Gus's door with a jar of apple butter as an apology. Inside, his house was spotless, shelves packed not with novels but cybersecurity manuals. "Hobbies," he said simply. He showed me what Tiffany had mistaken for binoculars. A digital soil moisture meter, the kind you stick in dirt to check if your roses need water. I brought it home and slammed it on the kitchen counter like a smoking gun. Tiffany looked at it and smiled coldly. "It doesn't matter what it is, Harrison. The truth is irrelevant. What matters is people believe he's dangerous." Her follower count was up 20%. Preston backed her, the fence stayed, the lawsuit stayed. "You're a guest here," Tiffany hissed. "Remember whose house you're standing in." 3 days later, Tiffany's $3,000 Pomeranian ate something near the fence and started seizing, foaming at the mouth. "He poisoned her," Tiffany screamed, dialing 911 instead of driving to the vet. Deputies dragged Gus out of his house in his wheelchair, yanking it over the doorframe. I stepped between them. "He threw nothing. I've been watching all day." Preston shoved me hard, and I went down on my hip in the grass. "You senile old man," he shouted loud enough for the neighbors, "defending a dog killer over your own family." There was no pregnancy, no grandchild. He was just performing. Gus, shivering on his porch afterward, told me softly, "You can't win, Harry. They have no souls." He was wrong about one thing. I'd spent 40 years finding the weak point in any structure. I just needed time. The following week, a process server delivered a lawsuit, Tiffany Bennett v. Augustus Wainwright, intentional infliction of emotional distress, demanding exactly $50,000, a suspiciously specific number. Sneaking into the main house for my mail, I overheard Preston on the phone with a bookie named Tony. He owed $45,000 from gambling and crypto losses, and the lawsuit was his exit plan. "The guy's old," he said. "He'll settle just to make it go away." Tiffany walked in unbothered, sipping a green smoothie, and casually mentioned Phase 2. When I confronted them, Preston revealed the real plan. Combine Gus's lot with ours for a luxury condo development worth $2 million. "He goes to a home, Dad, or he dies. Who cares? We're just accelerating the inevitable." I called them monsters. Preston reminded me who paid my electric bill. You're a burden, Harrison. An expensive burden. I walked out and called an old contact at the city planning office. I needed to know exactly how the property lines and utilities were structured. If they wanted to play with the law as a weapon, I knew the ground beneath their feet better than they ever would. 2 days later, Tiffany secured a restraining order using sworn statements from moderators who'd never set foot in Pennsylvania. Perjury dressed up as evidence. The order pushed Gus 30 feet back from the property line, effectively banning him from his own garden. His roses withered in the sun while he sat trapped inside, afraid to be arrested for stepping outside his own door. When I tried to check on him, I found my gate locked, new biometric locks, new cameras. "We upgraded security," Preston said. "You're vulnerable." "Gus knows you're the weak link." I was a prisoner in my own home. That night, I packed pain medication and a note into a towel, climbed out my window, and threw the bundle over the fence. A scrap of paper came back weighted with a stone. "They are watching." A red light blinked from the main house. A night vision camera had caught me. Then came Christmas Eve. Tiffany hosted an influencer party, while Preston made an anonymous call reporting a fake electrical hazard at Gus's house. City workers pulled his power meter in Five Below, whether deliberate, calculated, murderous. When I tried to bring Gus soup and a blanket, Tiffany blocked the door. "If you walk out, you're dead to us." I told her my family died the day I buried my wife, because the woman who raised Preston would never let a man freeze on Christmas. I pushed past her into the storm. I found Gus on the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket near a cold fireplace, teeth chattering, barely conscious. I broke his back window, got inside, fed him warm soup, and held him through the night while the wind howled. At dawn, he pressed a leather book and a small silver key into my hands. "Take this to Sterling Thorne," he whispered. "Don't look at it until I'm gone." I called the ambulance. 3 days later, Augustus Wainwright died of pneumonia and hypothermia. I came home from the hospital to find Preston grilling steaks in the freezing cold. Tiffany toasting with wine to clean views and high property values. They were celebrating his death like a lottery win. I said nothing. I arranged Gus's funeral alone, paid for with my savings, and told no one. At the funeral, only one other person showed. A man in an impeccable charcoal suit named Sterling Thorne, waiting for the key Gus had given me. He drove me back in his limousine and showed me an old photograph. A young Sterling standing beside a younger, unmistakable Gus in front of a server room. "Augustus Wainwright wasn't an actuary," Sterling said. "He founded Titan Security Systems. We sold it in 1998 for a fortune. When he died, his net worth was $42 million. I sat in stunned silence. The man they'd mocked as broke and senile, whose power they'd cut on Christmas Eve, had $42 million and had chosen a quiet, peeling paint life on purpose until my son and his wife destroyed his peace. And Gus hadn't been deaf or blind. His hearing aids were high fidelity, turned up the moment the harassment started. His house was rigged with military-grade cameras and long-range microphones. He'd heard everything, recorded everything. The poisoned dog, the forged documents, the gambling debts, the plan to bulldoze his garden and mine. Sterling took me to Gus's hidden basement server room, soundproofed walls, a horseshoe desk, 12 monitors glowing blue. The footage was undeniable. Tiffany, alone on the patio, pouring poison into her own dog's food bowl before staging the attack. Preston at his desk, tracing my signature onto a forged deed transfer. Boasting that he'd rerouted my bank alerts to a dummy account, so I wouldn't notice he was stealing my land. And Christmas Eve, Preston calling me a dying leech, Tiffany saying, "Let the cold do the work." I felt no tears, only the click of a structure locking into place. "I want a copy," I told Sterling. Everything? Then came the will. Gus's fortune went to veterans' charities and children's hospitals, but he'd created one entity just for me, Justice Holdings, LLC. Its sole asset was Preston's mortgage note. 6 months earlier, drowning in gambling debt, Preston had stopped paying his mortgage. Gus had quietly bought the defaulted loan from the bank through a shell company. My son hadn't owed money to a bank in months. He'd owed it to Gus. And he was 5 months delinquent, well past the legal threshold for foreclosure. I signed the paperwork. I now legally owned my son's house, and he owed me $1.2 million he could never pay. I found the demolition crew Preston had hired to bulldoze Gus's home the next morning. I redirected them. Change of plans, I told the operator. We aren't demolishing that house. We're cleaning out the trash next door. Preston and Tiffany arrived home from a celebratory trip to Cabo, tan and arrogant, pointing at the bulldozer and gloating about their clear lot. I met them at the front door of the house they no longer owned. Preston tried his key. It didn't work. I threw the foreclosure notice at his feet. The owner changed the locks, I said. I am Justice Holdings, Preston. Gus left it to me. You haven't paid a dime in 5 months. I'm exercising my right to take the property back. Tiffany lunged at me, screaming, hand raised to strike. I held up an iPad and played the video, her pouring poison into the dog bowl, staring blankly as her own pet convulsed. Recorded by Gus's security system, I said. The same system you swore didn't exist. Animal cruelty is a felony in Pennsylvania, or I send this to every brand that sponsors you. She froze, tears finally real. Preston dropped to his knees on the gravel, sobbing, blaming her. She turned on him, coward, loser, failure. Their marriage collapsed in the driveway in real time. I gave them 24 hours to pack their personal belongings, nothing bought with my money left with them. Where will we go? Preston begged. That sounds like a problem for adults, I said and walked into my house, deadbolt turning behind me. I didn't stop there. I uploaded the video of Tiffany poisoning her dog anonymously, tagged every brand, every shelter, every follower. Within hours, it went national. Her account was suspended. Her sponsors dropped her overnight. She fled to her parents' house in Atlanta under cover of darkness. Preston lost his real estate license once the foreclosure and gambling debts became public. Months later, I drove past a construction site and saw him sunburned, exhausted, hauling wet cement in a laborer's vest. He looked up. He didn't beg. He just looked at his boots and kept working. It was the best lesson I could have taught him. I sold the combined lots, Gus's and mine, to the developer for $4.8 million, at full market value, not the desperate lowball Preston had once hoped for. I donated generously to the local animal shelter in Princess's name. She'd survived and been adopted into a loving home, and to the Veterans Fund Gus had wanted supported. Then I packed a bag. I stood at the airport gate holding a boarding pass to Rome, the trip my late wife Sarah and I always said we'd take someday. We kept finding reasons to wait. She ran out of time. I decided I wouldn't. As the plane lifted off, I took the small silver key from my pocket and held it one last time. Gus had told me he was dangerous, and he was a quiet man sitting on the truth, waiting for the right hands to use it. He didn't detonate it himself. He left that to me. I am the one who lit the fuse. I am the one who burned the lies to the ground. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the fire. I was free. The most dangerous person in any room was never the one shouting. It was always the one who knew the truth and wasn't afraid to use it. Goodbye, Preston. Goodbye, Tiffany. Hello, world.